Hello and welcome to the Scarpagara War in this special opposition preview episode. And my guest needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. He's a former human resources manager turned stand-up comedian / comedy writer / producer and presenter. Credits include They Think It's All Over, Never Mind the Buzzcocks, 8 out of 10 Cats, Have I Got News for You, plus loads more. And he's presented on Match of the Day too. He co-presents one of my favourite podcasts, The Price of Football, with Kieran Maguire, and also a 5-year plan Crystal Palace podcast, Price of Football. If you've not heard that or checked that out on YouTube, please go ahead and do that. But more importantly, he's a Palace fan, and we're here to preview the FA Cup match on the 12th of January. It's only Kevin Day. You okay, mate?
I'm very well, yeah. Thank you for asking me. As I'm not going to get picky right at the start, but I present Price of Football.
Kieran, sorry.
But Kieran does all the hard work. So
Right.
I'm basically the lovable idiot who presents it and asks the stupid questions, and then Kieran educates and informs the rest of the world about football finance, basically. It's the most bafflingly successful podcast I think there is out there. But we both gave it 4 weeks when we were asked to do it, and here we are 5 years later, and it seems to have given people an interest in football finance that they didn't have 5 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I think you say it quite a lot on the podcast, don't you? That people know more about amortization than they would ever know, ever now.
Well, it worries me. And also, I have to say, Russ, whenever I do a pod like this, I have the words of my wife ringing in my ears because she knows that I like the sound of my own voice. So I will occasionally have to remind myself that this is your podcast. And so if I keep talking, just do a little cutthroat gesture and I'll cut it short. Yeah, I was sitting in the pub, like we're playing Chelsea on Saturday, and I'll be in the pub beforehand, in the same pub that we've been in for 35 years, talking to as my wife says, talking the same bollocks to the same people for 35 years at the same table in the same pub. But people will come up to me and they'll ask me, they'll say, "How are Chelsea managing to amortise these 8 years?" And I'll just go, "Mate, I have no idea." Because I don't listen to the pod, and everything Kieran tells me, I forget as soon as he tells me, because I have no head for figures or business. And I think that's one of the reasons the podcast works, because I am kind of the lovable idiot who doesn't know much about what's going on, whereas Kieran is the world's, I call him the world's leading football finance expert. He always says Swiss Ramble is the world's leading football finance expert. Yeah. And when Swiss Ramble was a guest on the pod, apparently it was very good. It was one of the dullest hours of my life, as I just sat back and listened to these two alpha males trying to alpha male each other on football finance issues and budgets and spreadsheets. It was terrible.
Well, on today's podcast, you are the guest, so I'm just going to sit back and listen to you, if that's all right, because you are a esteemed guest. I will chip in every now and again, of course. But yeah, just to reiterate, if to anybody listening to this, if you've not listened to The Price of Football, please do go listen to it, because I think it's fantastic. And that's where I wanted to start, really, on The Price of Football. How did that come about? Because it certainly wasn't a Palace fan being friends with a Brighton fan. I'm pretty sure of that. How did it?
That was an issue. Oddly enough, the guy whose idea it is lives in Stockport.
Oh, right.
He's a producer on 5 Live, and he had my details because I used to do a lot of stuff on 5 Live, a lot of football stuff. So he had my details, and Kieran used to do a lot of stuff he used to do like a business show early in the morning on 5 Live. But Guy Kilty, who we call Producer Guy, who unfortunately is a Man United fan, not a Stockport fan, but you have to live with what you have to live with. He contacted us both to say he'd had this idea for a podcast about football finance. Kieran and I, who'd never met each other, both independently wrote back to him to say, "That sounds like the worst idea I've ever heard." And both of us were very reluctant to get involved. And he said, "Well, just do it for 4 weeks and then we'll see how it goes." He also had the sense, as did Kieran. Kieran didn't mention that he was a Brighton fan, because I'm so immature, I wouldn't have done it. If they told me Kieran was a Brighton fan, I would have said, "I'm not working with a Brighton fan, thank you very much." But then it just so happens, it's not good luck at all, but it just so happens that the whole Bury situation was coming to a head at the time, and we were literally the only people outside your neck of the woods that were talking about what was happening in Bury, and also we were getting very passionate and very angry about what was happening in Bury. So that sort of got picked up on, and Kieran was telling the world what a wrong 'un Steve Dale was, and how basically he was lying about the figures, because Kieran knows more about the figures and the people who own the club. So we got a bit of attention because of that, and then it just spiraled from there. Really. And I think the important thing's always been that we talk about. We'll give as much time to Airdrie as we will do to Man United. Not at the moment. Man United are a big bone of contention with us on the pod for various reasons. Kieran, the Ratcliffe regime, are very unhappy with Kieran. He's had lots of cease and desist emails about the shocking things that they're doing. I mean, they're really. If ever there was an illustration that running a football club isn't like running any other business, the way Ratcliffe is trying to slash and burn his way through United is just shameful. Really is shameful. But if somebody was doing that to Airdrie or Swansea, we'd spend as much time talking about that as we would talking about Man United. And I think that just struck a chord with people, really. And then we carried on going through COVID, twice a week through COVID. And I think we just became part of people's routine in a way. And I think as well, because there are so many podcasts out there that just talk about football. In an ideal world, Kieran and I wouldn't want our pod to exist, because in an ideal world, every football club will be run sensibly by sensible people. But unfortunately, we're far from that world. So we're probably the only two people who are longing for the day that our podcast can happily shut down. But I think as well, because there are so many pods out there that you can hear about football, the fact that on ours it is specifically about football finance, but also we've become a bit of a sitcom really over the course of the time, because Kieran's never tasted alcohol or taken recreational drugs, and I work in showbiz, so our lifestyles are very different. And his dog and my cat became part of the whole thing, and the fact that he's a Brighton fan and I was a Palace fan, the fact that people were looking forward when we beat them 3-1 a couple of weeks ago, the fact that people were looking forward to seeing how that was going to be dealt with. And because I'm very childish, but also quite cruel, I dealt with it by not mentioning it for half an hour until he broke in the end. In the end, he said, "For the love of God, please mention the fact that you've just beaten us 3-1 our place." But it's just, I think as well, people have, because we just so clearly like, even though we've never met before, I love him like a brother. And it's strange because we met a few times before lockdown, and then I didn't see him for 2.5 years. Even now, I probably only see him in the flesh 10 times a year. But we've just got this really close relationship, and also I think as well to a certain end that our demographic is older without a doubt, and mostly male. But we represent a generation of what UEFA will probably call legacy fans. We represent those season ticket holders that clubs like Tottenham and Man United are trying to get rid of, and I think people just respect the fact that we're articulating the views of millions of football fans who just want to go to the game every week, buy their kids a ticket, buy a price of beer, a bottle of beer that doesn't cost them 10 quid, and the way we remember football, basically, which is a long way around of saying I still don't understand why it's so popular, but it's listened to by people in the game as well, which is the other interesting thing, because over the years we've made some high profile contacts. So we were part of the political inquiry into the independent regulator and all that sort of thing. So we're sort of taken seriously in the world of football, which is astonishing, because most of the time I host it, I've got a really bad hangover, and we are the least professional. In terms of the technical stuff, we're both middle-aged men. We haven't got a clue how we managed to get it up without breaking the internet. I don't know. We've got young people doing the button pushing, but I can honestly say I look forward to doing it so much. I love doing it. It's I can't wait for Monday and Wednesday when Kieran and I sit down to record it together, because we just laugh a lot of the time. And then a lot of the rest of the time we're just furious about what's happening to football clubs all over the place, basically. So I think the most important thing is that, and it's not just, we don't just talk about British clubs. So we'll talk about, somebody asked us about Sturm Graz in Austria recently, and Kieran did a real deep dive into that, and we got fans all over. And well, the other thing as well is we're both openly and vehemently critical of FIFA in a way that the BBC probably can't be, ITV probably can't be, The Athletic probably can't be, because they don't want to risk losing any access to FIFA and FIFA tournaments. We've got no access to FIFA or FIFA tournaments, full stop. So we can say exactly what we think about the World Cup going to Saudi Arabia without, we get some emails which are obviously from the Saudi Arabian government, but we can say what we want. We're completely independent. It's the same way you'll probably find with your pool when on the 5-year plan, the worst episodes we ever did a 5-year plan. And again, it's wonderful doing a club pod because you don't have to explain anything to anyone. It's like if I'm on Talk Sport and the name Dave Swindlehurst comes up, I have to explain to people who Dave Swindlehurst is. If I'm doing a 5-year plan, we all know. Even the 25-year-olds know who Dave Swindlehurst is. So it's brilliant doing a club pod. But the worst episodes we did were when Steve Parish came on, because you just have to. You can't be honest with him. Yeah, because you just have to mind your P's and Q's, and you can't have a go at him. And because he's technically the best club owner we've ever had, you can't even challenge him on transfer policy or when's this fucking new stand happening, because he's kept us in the Premier League for so long. So on the price of football, we haven't got that, so we can be free and open and honest, basically.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for being independent, as we are on our podcast. Yeah. Just sort of swinging back then to the price of football stuff. I've thought this for a long time. I mean, Kieran's openly says he used to live in Stockport. I think
he did. Yeah, he loves
Cheadle Hume.
Yeah. He loves the Northwest. He spends a lot of his time in. He's been a lecturer at Liverpool University for a long time, but he went to college in Manchester. He's obsessed with music, even more so than I am. So he loves the music of, he loves the Smiths, he loves the Buzzcocks, he loves the Fall, he loves the Cure more than any man should love anybody, basically. But he loves that part of the world. So he lived in Stockport for a while. So he's got he played for Trafford Cricket Club for a long, long time. So he's got a huge soft spot for your part of the world. And of course, as well, that means when he's dealing with Man United, he knows the economic realities for most Man United fans. When Offshore Jim is saying, well, we're going to put the tickets up in January to 66 quid and 100 quid next season, Kieran knows the economic realities for people around your way and what a difficult thing that is going to be. And the reason they're doing that is the reason that Tottenham, West Ham, Arsenal are all doing the same thing, because they don't want fans like us to be going to their grounds. They don't want season ticket holders. They want to be able to sell every ticket on a match-by-match basis, so tourists can come over, spend 300 quid in the club shop, spend another 100 quid in the bar, and not notice that the roof at Old Trafford is pissing water on them. Whereas people like us, we get to Palace. We sit in the pub for 3 hours. We get to Palace at 5 to 3 because we know exactly which turnstile to go through, and we know the route down to the last second. But I wouldn't dream of sitting in Sellers Park drinking beer there, because the stand we're in, which you'll be in for the away game, isn't fit for purpose. So why would anyone want to go there early on? And again, but I've said this to Steve Parish, I won't be doing it when you build the new stand. It could be the nicest stand in the world with the nicest bars. I'll still be in the Paulson's Arms until 15 minutes before kickoff, because I prefer it there and I'm happy with the people in there.
Yeah, it's a real sense of community. We'll come on to that, because I sort of got a comment further down that, and the ticket prices as well for the FA Cup clash. They're really good, but that's sort of later on. The other thing I wanted to mention was that again, going back to the price of football, it's not a show about the price of football, although we could make it into that, I'm sure. But obviously, producer guys from Stockport, and he's a United fan. We get a lot of that around here. That's economically, we have to compete with that, which is, again,
of course,
probably a price of football sort of question. But what I did want to say was, I'm glad you say it a lot on the show, or you both do. The clubs that are, the clubs that aren't mentioned on it, you should be sort of glad about that, because you're normally talking about bad news. And we've got our investor now, Mark Stott, who came in 2020. It's a shame that the price of football wasn't going in the 2009 onwards, because you could have had a right laugh at some of the stuff at our club that happened, that sent us into sort of non-league regional football, semi-professional football. So as a county fan, and I think all county fans sort of thank our lucky stars that we're not featured on the price of football every week, like Everton, Morecambe, Fleetwood,
Derby, Reading, all those clubs. And the trouble is, there are some things that we can't even talk about because there's sub-judice, or they're. So Kieran knows that quite often we talk about Derby or Reading. We know the situation is far worse than it is or was publicly, but we kind of have to keep that to ourselves. And Kieran's fantastic at working with with fans groups. It's like we'll get a lot of, as you said, back in 2009, you would have come onto the Price of Football.
Yeah.
But Kieran works on a daily basis with, so he's working with Reading fans at the moment to try to find ways for them to get rid of their terrible owner, for them to try and raise enough money to maybe have a stake in the club and go. So Kieran, I talk the talk quite happily, but Kieran walks. But it's interesting as a Palace fan when you talk about being a Stockport fan, because we don't really see ourselves as a London club. We're not a London club in a way that Arsenal, Chelsea, Spurs, West Ham are, and even Fulham fans. Fulham's a genuine, partly because people like Richard Osman and Hugh Grant are high-profile Fulham fans, and partly because they built this huge new stand, and partly because they're charging 110 quid for a ticket. People think Fulham are a very posh team, but they're not. They're a traditional working class team, but they see themselves as a West London, same as QPR. QPR don't see themselves as a London team the way we do, the way the other teams, because we don't get. Steve Parrish's ball. We had this brilliant branding thing 5 years ago, South London and Proud, which Palace fans really bought into. Really bought into the notion that we are different to the rest of London. But Parish is bored with that now because it's too parochial. He wants, he looks at Spurs, with their waiting list of 14 million South Koreans, wanting to come to a Tottenham game, and he wants that for Selhurst Park. But we're not like that. We're not a global brand the way Arsenal are, the way Man United are, and for the most part, we're perfectly happy with that. It's brilliant to be in the Premier League. But I want to be on the Premier League on our terms. I want to be on the Premier League with our fans. For the most part, people don't travel more than 30 miles to come and see Palace games, and it sounds off it, but I'm perfectly. I'm always very welcoming when you get Americans and Scandinavians and people coming to Palace. Of course, we're welcoming to it. It's brilliant that they support our club and they know as much about Palace as I do. But at the same time, if that's at the expense of pricing out people I know who simply can't afford tickets on a match by match basis anymore. I don't know why I started. I've just been distracted. That happens a lot. I'll start answering a question and then completely forgotten why I started answering in the first place. It's just the fact that we've probably got more in Stockport than you would imagine, because in terms of, as far as you support your local team, and that's how it should be. At the same time, I don't blame anyone like producer Guy for not. So when I was growing up, there were so few Palace fans in my class because we were nothing, we were nowhere, which made it more fun at the time, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, I did want to allude to that, to be honest, and ask you a question, because I always see Palace as, and excuse the phrase, but like a proper London club. I get the feeling like you just said. Like you've just said, the people that travel there are probably within a 30-mile radius. Like Stockport, it's within even grandly even less, if that's even a term phrase. But and that's how I see it. And I don't see Palace in the same breath as Chelsea, Arsenal, and Spurs and that, because it just doesn't have the feel. And with the ground as well, Selhurst Park, I've been 3 or 4 times now. It's got the old school feel of a proper stadium, hasn't it?
Or shithole, if you prefer. It depends how you do.
No.
But I'm of a generation where the word "proper" to me, I get very proud when people call us a proper club, because to me that's an ultimate compliment. Because Palace would be, because where I grew up in South, I'm very proud of London. I'm a very proud Londoner, and I love the history of London. But where I grew up in South London, it's a very nebulous part of the world. There's no real landmarks. There's nothing you can point out. If you say, I'm from Tooting Bec, and it's close to Streatham and Mitcham, people outside the area go, I don't know where that is. So growing up, my identity was Palace. It's always been Palace. My identity is Londoner, Palace, and then of course you identify with your family and your friends. But being a Palace fan gave me, and it's amazing, sometimes I get recognised for being a comedian or for being a writer or for being a match. I get recognised for being a Palace fan, and that makes me really happy. When people say to me, "Oh no, you're a Palace fan," I couldn't be more pleased. It's a beautiful thing, but it's impossible to explain to people who don't host pods about Stockport County. So if you're at a wedding, I always panic. If you're at a wedding and you're at a table with somebody who doesn't like football, I don't know, I'm out. I'm gone, basically. But it's impossible to explain that connection you feel with a football club to somebody who has no idea. But I'm going to the theatre. I love theatre. I love all sorts of cultural things, but football's the most important thing in my life. And I'm guessing that when Stockport were going through that period when they nearly went out of business, you probably felt closer to Stockport fans. I think in a bizarre sort of way, the two proudest times of my life as a Palace fan were the two times we nearly went out of business, and we were 5 minutes away from liquidation the last time. But the sense of unity and camaraderie from people at the club was fantastic. And again, you can't explain that to people who don't know football, or who only know it from going to Arsenal because their accountant gets them a ticket, or going to West Ham because there's always spare tickets. There are a lot of fans who love Premier League football, but who don't really understand football the way that you and I would understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with you. I mean, I was part of a supporters trust that tried to keep the club alive and applied for an AVC and all these types of things, and spent hours and hours in meetings, late nights and all that kind of stuff. And it's a difficult one because you kind of do all that to keep your club alive, don't you, at the times of need? And then now we're getting a bit of success, and okay, it's on a smaller scale than anything like from the likes of the Premier League. We are getting lots of new fans or new age fans who never experienced that, and you kind of got to not bite your lip, but you've got to take them on board and say, right, come on the journey with us, because you are Stockport County fans at the end of the day. And I guess you staying in the Premier League, and you've had, obviously you went down into tier 2, we'll call it, for people who are listening, old and new, almost into tier 3, because you've been in the Premier League now for quite some time, I think, haven't you?
Our 13th season, it's the longest ever period we've spent up there. So
I guess you'll get those new age fans, online fans, and things like that because of the way that social media is taken off. Are you seeing that with Palace?
Yeah, we have the same. There's a Hungarian guy called Akos. He's been coming to Palace for a long time. And there's a Finnish guy called Mikko who's been coming to Palace for a long time. So they'll fly over for 6 games a season. They don't like each other for some reason, I don't know. And Mikko is the most depressing. Mikko's the most depressing Finnish bloke you could ever meet in your life. But they love Palace. But they've been coming over for years, and they dislike the new overseas fans more than we don't dislike them. We're just wary of the whole process because, as I say, we're not that sort of club. We're not a global brand. What we tend to get more is so the row in front of us, where I sit in the alpha weight, the row in front of us has now been deselected, they call it. So whereas that was all season tickets until last season, they're now available on a match by match basis. So the people you're sitting with now change. So you've got this. There's like 30 people I go with, but we're different parts of the ground. So I sit with 6 people in this particular part of the ground. So they never change, but the whole front row in front of us changes week to week. And we had a group of Americans. What game was it? Newcastle, I think, who got bored at half time. It clearly wasn't. They got restless after about 10 minutes, and you could sense it wasn't the experience they were expecting, or that they've been sold. Because as I say, where we are in the alpha weight, it's not fit for purpose. It really isn't. If you want to guarantee getting a drink, one of us has to leave at 3:35 on the match. If you want to guarantee getting a drink before the end of half time, so we take it in turns to go to the bar, and the seats are cramped and there's limited access because it's an old stand, and that's not what they were expecting. But the biggest issue we have is with younger fans. It is with fans who are now because as I'm sure in the pub where you drink, mates of mine have now got kids, grandkids in some stages. Some of those have only known Premier League football. So we've got this thing where the younger fans are furious every season. We're going, well, we've got to kick on. Now Brighton have been in Europe. We have to kick on. We have to get into Europe. Yeah. We have to spend whatever it takes. And the rest of us are going, look, these are the glory days. I remember going to Shrewsbury, Wrexham in 1976 and 1977 as a kid. These are the good days. Being in the Premier League, and yes, it would be nice to be safe from relegation in January, but being in the Premier League is remarkable for a club our size. Don't start doing what Charlton did, spending money you haven't got to try to get into Europe. But that's what they want, because it's like suddenly the Premier League's not enough. It's like, they see Forest at the moment having a fantastic season. You go, well, why aren't we doing that? And you go, well, it would be nice, and we thought that we would kick on this season, but at the same time, if we finish 12th, which is our natural position, I'll be perfectly happy, because I don't want to risk. I don't want new owners coming in and suddenly betting the bank on us trying to finish 6 places higher so we can go to Albania on a Thursday night. It's like I would love to do that. It's a long cherished ambition for me to see Palace play in a proper European competition, and it doesn't help that West Ham won it. But West Ham are a bigger club than we are. They're just in terms of their history and their tradition and their finances, they're a bigger club than we are. They can afford better players, but there is a restlessness amongst certain elements of Palace fans for whom. But you say to them, well, look at Stoke, and the trouble is that Stoke were relegated too long ago for them to know, because Stoke, who were an established Premier League team, the richest club, one of the richest clubs in the world, let alone the UK, because of their owners, Bet365, they got relegated. They haven't got a cat's hope in hell of coming back. They've not even been in the top half of the Championship since they got relegated. So losing our place in the Premier League would be a terrible, terrible thing. So, but younger fans, and I understand why younger fans don't agree with that. They just think you've got no ambition. We need to be kicking on. But it's a strange thing to be in a league where you can't possibly win, which is what we start every season. We're in the league, especially because Leicester ruined it for the rest of us, because the top 4 clubs had the rules changed to make sure a club like Leicester would never happen again. So it is odd to start the season thinking, well, we can't win this league. But at the same time, if staying in the league is enough, then we have to make sure that we stay in it.
Yeah. That was one of my questions, actually, because I read recently, and it was a blog. It was a Stockport County blog, but they were talking to a Palace fan. It was very recently, and this Palace fan hates the Premier League because of VAR, FFP, Big Six, and all this kind of everything you've just mentioned. But under no circumstances wants to play in the Championship.
There was a time, I've been through 2 administrations with Palace, and I've been. The last one, when we were 5 minutes away, I was locked in the toilet crying my eyes out because I thought, I'm not ashamed to say that. I've been through those things. So we get more philosophical. I think when you've been through that, you think, well, as long as we got a club to. But there was a time in the 80s and 90s, when you got relegated, you think, well, it's a nuisance, but it's not a disaster. It has become a disaster. I'm a trustee of the Palace for Life, our foundation. If we get relegated, our budget goes down by about a third. There's a sort of parachute payment from the Premier League, but so that means that a lot of people in our area, a lot of the programs that we do for young people, for gang members, for all sorts of people, they will disappear. And with the way our current ownership goes, we wouldn't be able to buy our way straight back into the Premier League. So I don't like I hate the Premier League. I genuinely don't like the Premier League, to be perfectly honest. But at the same time, every now and again, when you're watching Mo Salah play or Kevin De Bruyne play, you go, well, do you know what? I would much rather be here than scrabbling for survival in the Championship. So I want to stay in the Premier League, but it is a strange thing to be in a league where 12th is the limit of your ambition every year. And it's especially when you do see Brighton get into Europe, when you see Bournemouth doing so well, you think, hang on a second, Bournemouth have hardly lost a game at home this season. How are Bournemouth doing where they are? Why are Brentford doing so well this season? Why are Forest doing so well? Because we genuinely thought, and it's odd for me to be optimistic, but at the end of last season, I thought this would be the season that we push on. I thought there's something new going on here. We've got a new manager. He's young. He's full of ideas. He's full of energy. He's one of the nicest people you could meet. He's fantastic. He's really bought into the ethos of the club and the fans. And I genuinely thought this but it's turned into exactly the same as the 12 seasons in the Premier League before that. It's almost as though it's almost like this is our first season. It's almost like we've been promoted for the first time. Whereas clubs we did the Price of Football live in Brighton just before Christmas. It was a benefit that Kieran organised for a Brighton charity. We did it at Brighton. It was all Brighton fans. And basically, I just sat there for 2 hours listening to Brighton, their CEO going, we've got a 10-year plan. We know who our manager's going to be. The 3 managers after this one. We've got these things going. You think, Jesus Christ, but for us, we're just a shamble. It seems as though staying in the Premier League was a massive surprise, and our recruitment policy is all over the place. So you sometimes wonder how it is we're still in the Premier League somehow. But I really thought this time was going to be different. and it just hasn't turned out to be that way. And it's frustrating. It is frustrating because, you know, Glasner's a really interesting. I mean, Glasner's almost too honest for his own good. He said that the window, the summer transfer window, was 4 players were brought in on deadline day, 3 of whom he didn't want. And he said that when I took the job, he said, I don't want players being brought in on deadline day. He certainly didn't want Nketiah. He didn't want Chalobah. Having said that, the player he really did want, Kamada, is just one of the worst players I've seen at Palace for he's now known as the Japanese Max Meyer, which is just he's obviously a good player. Clearly, there's a good player in there, but he's just the Premier League's too physical. So neither our recruitment team or Glasner are brilliant at bringing in the right players, but we never bring in players at the right time. We don't have the same global recruitment system that Brighton have. We don't have the same data analysis that Brighton and Brentford have. We just seem to somehow scramble our way through. And we're every now and again we're happy because we win a game we shouldn't win, rather than going, we shouldn't be celebrating like we've won the FA Cup because we've got a point against Chelsea away. We should be better than that. But there's just an attitude that it doesn't help that we've got a co-owner in John Textor who desperately wants to get out, but wonders why he can't sell his 40% stake when he's spent the last year saying that the worst thing he ever did was buying 40% stake in Crystal Palace, because he owns 40% of the club, but he has no say in the day-to-day running, because it's very difficult not to call them Donner and Blitzen, but the other two are Harris and Blitzer, the other two, and Parish, they vote as a block. So Textor wants to sell his 40% share, but there's nobody out there who wants to buy 40% of a Premier League football club. And Steve Parish has made it plain that he will never sell his 15%. So again, if Dubai, for example, God forbid, wanted to come in and buy Palace, if you've got a bloke who's there who's saying, I'm not going to sell you my 15%, then Dubai will look elsewhere. So we're stuck at the moment. Steve Parish is desperate. This vanity project of this new stand, which we don't particularly want or need. The rest of it's going to make it worse for where we are in the Arthur Way, because when that stand's built in 5 years, we'll be like Victorian urchins pressing our nose up. All we'll be able to see is this fantastic bit of kit on the other side of the pitch, while we're still squashed up, having to queue for an hour to get a terrible pint of lager for £7.
So what's the rationale behind this new stand-up that's not the one that's not fit for purpose then? Is the other one even more not fit for purpose? Or
the other one is older, so it's the original main stand. The other one's got more space behind it, basically. So behind behind the stand we're in, is it's in a suburban street. For one, as your away fans will see it. So it's in a terraced street, basically. So that would have. So having to buy all those houses and make all those families homeless wouldn't have been a good look. I mean, I don't know if you remember going to Liverpool a few years back, when Liverpool just street by street bought up all the properties around the ground and bunged people, essentially evicted people. Not everybody owned their properties; they were buying them, and if you were a tenant, no Palace fans wanted that. So you have got behind the stand there developing. There is the car park, and there is a bit of space for the broadcasting truck. So, but they keep talking about the fact that we're going to do it in the same way Liverpool did it. That we're going to build the stand around the existing stand. We can't. We can't dream of levels of competence like that. It's already 6 years since it was announced. It was supposed to be open this season. It should have been open for this cup game. We won't be able to do that. So it'll be. I imagine it'll be 10 years in the making. I think our match day income, which is not brilliant anyhow, will inevitably go down. And of course, the worst thing that can happen to Parish is that stand opens and we're back in the Championship, because. Yeah. The whole stand, the only reason John Textor was brought in was to fund the infrastructure of the stand, because the idea of the stand was it would help attract the Scandinavians and the South Koreans, and exactly why Fulham have built their stand, because Fulham is selling all these tourist packages. It's half an hour from Heathrow, and again with Palace, Steve Parish has got this idea. We're 40 minutes from Gatwick, so come to London, fly to Gatwick, come to a game, and when this new stand is built, all the corporate stuff is going to be in that one stand. So all the boxes will be in that one stand. all the disabled fans will be in that one stand, which is one good thing to come out of it, because our ground is so old. Disabled access is shocking. It's terrible. It's embarrassing, to be perfectly honest. So at least that will be resolved. But it's there because it's funny. Our CEO, who I get on really well with, and the CEO we had before that, both have the same thing. So when you're dealing with Steve Parish, the first thing you do is hope that he forgets what he's asked for the next day, because he'll go for a meeting with Daniel Levy and he'll come back and go, "Why haven't we got? Where's our South Koreans? Why haven't we got a stand that holds 40,000 people at one end?" And you have to explain the reasons to him, but even better, hope that he forgets that and hope that he moves on to something else. Because the fact is as well, and it comes back to the conversation we had earlier, Russ, the vast majority of Palace fans don't want the new stand or are disinterested in the new stand because we won't be able to afford to go in there, essentially, because we'll be priced out of it. Our season, and to Steve Parish's credit, and I often sound critical towards him, and I know this, and he knows that. But to his credit, he's done a lot of good things, and freezing season ticket prices is one, and introducing monthly payments for season ticket prices is another, and for the most part, keeping away prices reasonable. So it is another good thing. But he wants his stand so he just wants to attract. And there are other issues with Steve Parish in the Championship as well, is that when we talked to Trevor Birch, from the head of the EFL on the price of football, he tells us quite openly that Steve Parish is the one in the Premier League who's most against the distribution of money from the Premier League to the other 72 clubs in the pyramid. So we can't get rid. He'll be humiliated if we end up back in the Championship and he's having to rely on Premier League money to help fund his new stand or to help keep us afloat. He's going to be, so he's desperate for us to stay in the Premier League, but even more, he's desperate for us to be in the Premier League and have this fancy swish new stand. That's what he dreams of. He wants to be like the other owners. He wants to be like Liverpool and Man United. He's a Palace fan, but he's a businessman as well. And he's listen, he's kept us in the Premier League for 12 seasons. He's without a doubt the best owner we've ever had, without a doubt. But the trouble is, when he first took the club over with the other three in the syndicate, they were rich, but they weren't wealthy. And then since then, they've slowly gone down the scale of wealthy club owners. So Steve Parish can't compete in any way, shape, or form. He can't compete with Tony Bloom at Brighton in terms of personal wealth. He can't compete with your man at Brentford in terms of personal wealth. We can't compete with the likes of Spurs and Man United on match day income at the moment. So this whole project he doesn't see it as for him, this whole project is about taking Palace into the future. But we don't, as fans, we don't want it. We're not that sort of club. It's like we went to Arsenal a couple of weeks ago in the quarterfinal of the Carabao Cup, and you go to Arsenal, you go, this is a nice ground, it's a lovely ground, but we don't want our ground to be like that. We don't want our ground to look the same at both ends and either side. And he can't understand that. He doesn't understand why. He just thinks we're being old-fashioned and stubborn. And in a way, he's just kind of waiting us out. He just wants to wait for a new generation of fans who, that's all they want, is a lovely ground like that with beautiful. And to be fair, it's much easier to get a drink at Arsenal than it was at Palace. It's much easier to get in because the entrances weren't built in the mid-60s when people were smaller. But it's a strange one because personally, I can't see it ever being built, to be perfectly honest. But it seems to be going full speed ahead.
It sounds like you're in a position where it's not quite turmoil and all hands on deck and panic stations. It's more like limbo. Could be turmoil in the future. Could go the other way.
Limbo is exactly the right way to describe it. Really, we all know that we've got this co-owner situation, which just isn't working. It's stopping us moving forward on the pitch without a doubt. And we're still too much of a cottage industry, and so it's an odd thing because until 5 years ago, the club was run by two people: Phil Alexander, who was then the CEO, and Terry Byfield, who was the press officer. If you had a problem, you'd phone one of them up, basically, and not just me, everyone. You'd phone one of them up, and they'd sort it out. whether it was tickets, whether it is you wanted to book a room for a wedding or whatever it was, you'd phone them. Now we've got a whole department. We've got a media department. We've got comms team. I don't know who to phone anymore. There's no contact. So it's kind of swish, but at the same time that doesn't suit us either. So Parish has got everything he wants in terms of lovely multimedia people that are and setting up supporters clubs abroad, and Mark Bright goes abroad as an ambassador for, but it kind of bemuses the rest of us, and it seems to be at the expense of what's happening on the pitch, because it's quite clear to those of us who go every week that Glasner hasn't been well served in the players. It's like you'll see he loves wing-back. He's wedded, for all that Glasner's a really good, exciting manager, he's totally wedded to playing two in midfield, whoever that two is. So against Fulham a few weeks ago, when we had an injury crisis, he brought in a 19-year-old for his debut and played Gahey as a central midfield player. It just didn't work. All right. But if we're 3-0 up or 3-0 down, he won't change that system. He loves the two wing-backs. But we have no cover at wing-back at all. We've got Tyreek Mitchell and Daniel Munoz, who are two of our best players. If one of those is injured, there's no one on the bench in that position. We've got 11 centre-backs. So we're not short of centre-backs. We've got Wharton. We're not sort of centre midfield players. But in the position that's most important in the system he plays, we have no cover at all. And that's down to the club, because we're sometimes like a toddler. You see, like a toddler putting their mum and dad's shoes on. We've got that. Like, we sort of know how it looks and we know how it should work, but we can't somehow quite make it work. We can make it work enough to stay in the Premier League, because I'm aware that this is one of those world's smallest violin conversations, because Stockport fans and fans of other clubs will be going, "Oh, poor you, stuck in the middle of the Premier League every season." And as I say, I'm aware of not spending money we haven't got to get any higher. But at the same time, I remember doing Talk Sport the first week of the season, and I blame Andy Jacobs for this, because Andy Jacobs said, "I think Palace will finish 7th." I said, "Don't say that out loud. Please don't say that," because my ambition as a Palace fan is for us to be safe in January, right? And that's what you hope for. And it's exactly what the club hoped for. Parish said this a lot. Glasner said this a lot. Let's see where we are in January, and let's have a go in the Cups, which is why I think we'll play a really strong team against you, because Glasner was furious when we knocked out to Arsenal in the Carabao Cup. It was in the first half at their place. We played really well in the first half. Second half, they were just sensible enough to put an extra man in midfield, and they played round us. And Glasner was upset, and he said in his post-match speech, he said, "Well, I really thought we could get to Wembley with this, so let's see how far we can get in the FA Cup." So I think we will play as strong a team as possible against you. Whereas Roy Hodgson would, despite the fact he's very old school and traditional, he hated the FA Cup. He thought it was a nuisance. If Hodgson was still our manager, we'd play a really weakened team against you. But I think we'll play a very strong, as we should, because you're doing really well this season. There's still a chance that you and I could be playing in the same league next season. If things go badly for us and better for you, we could be in the same league. So he won't underestimate you. We will play a strong team. But if we lose a couple of players against Chelsea, at the cover we've got a really good first team, I would say, this year. A really good first team. Outside of that, we look weak. If the 11 players are all, and it's unusual. You very rarely get a season when Palace fans can 90% of the time will agree on the 11 that should start a game. Some might prefer Richards to Chalobah at centre back. Some might prefer the Wharton to Decore, for example. But Will Hughes, who's bizarrely, who I owe him such an apology, Will Hughes, because the last 3 years on the 5-year plan, I've been going, why haven't we? Why is he even on the? And this year, he's been outstanding this season. The player that I thought was a journeyman, typical Roy Hodgson, he's been outstanding to the extent that the decision in midfield is who plays with Will Hughes. Basically, right. He's been outstanding. But so yeah, most Palace fans will agree what our first 11 is. After that, none of us can agree who should be on the bench even.
So, I mean, you're knocking off a lot of the answers to the questions I've got, which is fabulous.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's perfectly all right. So, because I was going to say, will it be a strong team? Because you've got Chelsea on Saturday. We're recording this on the 2nd of January, though. So just put that out there. So you've got Chelsea on Saturday, but after our game the following Sunday, you've got what I would say are 6 pointers against Leicester, West Ham, and Brentford. So would it not be realistic for you to play a week? Well, not a weakened team, but a rotated squad.
I love the FA Cup, so I would be upset if he did. I don't think he will. The way he's been talking, I really don't think. I think Hodgson would have done. I think that Ipswich result the other night when they beat Chelsea might change things, because apart from the West Ham result and the 5-1, and to be fair, even in the first half, against Arsenal, when we were 3-1 down, that wasn't a 3-1. We didn't deserve to be 3-1 down. We did deserve to be 5-1 down by the end of it. But taking that out of the equation, that's the only game we've lost in 8 Premier League games. And if Glasner was under pressure, then beating Brighton away takes away any of that pressure. Ipswich beating Chelsea was a real nuisance, because suddenly what was looking like a quite healthy gap was that. But we're only 2 points behind Man U. We're only 3 points behind West Ham, so we are looking up for the first time in the season. Our record against teams in and around us isn't too bad. So those 3 games we've got coming up, and then we've got another. I can't remember who it was. We've got another big team, but then we've got 3 winnable games. I don't think anyone at the club genuinely thinks that we are going down, and that's not an arrogant thing to say. I just think we are easily better than at least 2 teams. And I think if Ipswich can stay in the Premier League with what is essentially a League One, 2 promotions in 2 years, I think that would be a remarkable achievement if they can maintain their. I fully expect them to do a Luton and just sort of slip away a little bit, because the adrenaline and the physical fitness will take its toll. But so I don't think we'll go down. But I think Glasner really wants to kick on in the FA Cup. I really think he really wants to try and make a statement. So I'd be really surprised if we did. And the other thing as well, which is really frustrating, is that we're now a Grade 1 academy. And again, to be fair to Parish, he spent a lot of money making us a Grade 1 academy, because he wants to become, as he says, he wants to become the wolf in South London. That's the way he talks. He wants to be the wolf. He wants to be the predator. He wants to be the Grade 1 academy. You can hoover up kids from other clubs who haven't got Grade 1 academies in South London. But at the moment, our really good potential kids are 16 and 17. There's no real outstanding players in the academy team, the 20, 21-year-olds. Certainly Glasner's not showing any interest in really. Quite a few of them have been on the bench, but very few of them are getting any minutes. So it's not like we can say, look, we've got 3 kids, they need to get game time, start them against Stockport. We haven't got that luxury even. So I expect a strong team, and if you were bottom of League 2, maybe but even then, I think you'd still play a strong team. I really do. So I'm expecting a strong team from us.
Okay, interesting. Of the team that's likely to be fielded, then I'm always one for homegrown players. How many of those are there, and then do you produce them on the regular basis?
Of the first team that starts, we've got players. Eze's from South London, but he came.
I was going to say that people are probably shouting at their podcast players now and YouTube and saying, "Russ, you should know this." But
no, you won't, because Eze's not one of our academy. We got Eze from QPR, and he was a late developer. He was playing futsal and cage football before he got sort of picked up. Gahey's from South London, but he ended up at Chelsea's academy. So I'd be surprised if any of the players that started against you were from our academy. I don't think any of them will be homegrown products. Zahar obviously was. Hang on. If Klein won't start. Klein came through our academy a long, long time ago before he ended up at Southampton and Liverpool. But I don't think. The kid who started at right back against Arsenal in the cup game, possibly, but even then, I'd be amazed if any of our academy players start against you. And as I say, the generation that are coming through are not. Whereas there's always been a John Solarco or a John Bostock that you knew about and you'd heard of coming through, and that's not coming at that level. But it seems that beneath that, 16 and 17-year-olds are a good crop, but then they've got no chance. They won't be anywhere near the game against you, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. Before we get on to the very last part of the show, which is looking back, so there's probably a song by somebody that I'm forgetting about, but I wanted to speak about the price that has been that everybody's been charged, which is 15 quid for an adult, £5 for an under 18. I'm sure you were as well, delighted when that came out. I was expecting sort of Tamworth prices, 44 quid, but yeah. Don't know if you got anything. I mean, I guess you agree with me. That's a really good initiative by Palace.
I think this does come from Steve Parish. Steve is aware of the importance, and you're a smaller team than we are, so he's aware that there'll be a lot of Stockport fans wanting to come down to the game. He's also aware that a lot more of them will come down if it's only 15 quid a ticket and 5 quid for kids. He's also aware that there were times 10 years ago, certainly when Jordan was chair, that we would get, for a game like this against you, we'd get a crowd of 8,000-9,000, and 4,000 of them would be you, because they would charge us normal game prices to come in and see the game. Parish is far aware that it's just much better to have a full stadium, and if it takes charging 50, it's just the theory. And again, it's that strange sort of thing. All Palace fans are pleased by that decision, and it's something I don't think Steve Parish always recognised. Something that a lot of club owners don't recognise. It's like we talked on the pod about Chorley Town opening their grounds on Christmas Day for people in the town that might not have company or might not be able to afford a Christmas. It's a brilliant gesture like that will put a spring in the step of every Chorley Town fan. And it's like every club, Stockport included, during COVID did amazing things for their community. And when you're a fan of those clubs doing those things, you think, yeah, great, that's a really good thing we've done. And it's the same with the 15 quid tickets, because other clubs would have gone. I remember Macclesfield playing Chelsea, and Chelsea just went, well, we'll make it 45. The Macclesfield fans will pay what they want, because they'll be desperate to see a big game. Parish is good at things like free coach travel at the end of the season for Palace fans. If you've got enough points, then you'll get a coach travel for free. He's good, but it is little things like that make you think he's not the evil capitalist that other people think he always is. So that's a real, because we would rather see. I'd rather see that side packed out. But we had a Carabao Cup game early in the season, and I was just really annoyed because the stand at Albion was closed. I can't even remember who we were playing, but the crowd was only about 8,000. It's like, don't have an end. Just give those tickets away to schools.
Yeah,
fill it up. Just have some noise and some energy, because also you give those tickets away to schools, the chances are those kids will go, well, I'm going to be a Palace fan from now on. It's like, so the more Stockport fans there are, the merrier, the better the atmosphere, the better the game will be, as far as I'm concerned. And it's like, we always love it when fans come down and join in, because as long as you don't start it's like Arsenal fans within 30 seconds of kickoff, when the place was a cauldron of noise, and you can just in the distance hear Arsenal fans singing, "Where's your famous atmosphere?" It's like you can't hear yourself sing it because of the atmosphere. You fucking global prick. But no, obviously I know the excitement from the old days of us travelling to away games, and the more away fans there are, the better it is. I'm all for it. So I think the 15 quid thing is a really good, and the 5 quid for kids as well is very sensible. Because you want to quite a lot of the time at the third round of the FA Cup, it's probably traditionally it seems to be a time when people take their kids for the first time. And a lot of the kids who support Stockport County, it will probably take you a while before you're in the Premier League. So there's going to be a lot of kids going, we're going to a Premier League ground. Unfortunately, they will be disappointed when they get here, because, as I say, it's a shithole. But they'll still be. I think you need to tell your kids coming down, this is not quite the same as the Premier League grounds you see on telly, lads and girls. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've been spoiled. It was only 3 years ago we were paying, 20 quid to go and watch us play Solihull away, and now we're being charged 35 quid to go to Charlton. So it's I'm sure we'll have a great day. I mean, to be honest, like I said to you on the sort of the pre-call to this, me and my lad's 16, we were jumping around the living room when the draw came out. Last two balls, because
last two balls, I know.
it's proper. It's proper. You know,
I know.
proper away Premier League tie.
And also, to be fair, all we want every season is a club that we don't normally play at Selhurst Park, basically, or one we've never been to away from home. But the trouble is, we've got a good relationship with Accrington Stanley on the pod, and like we'd love to have played Accrington away, but we would never have got tickets for that. So for us, this is probably the best draw, a lower league club that we've got every chance of beating, fingers crossed.
Yeah,
at Selhurst Park.
Yeah, fair dues. No, I'm sure it'll be a good day. Okay, just to sort of finish off then, I wanted to take you back to that game. Do people call it the Doogie Freeman game? I don't know. I mean, it was just another game for us back in 2001, I think it was.
6th of May 2001. We occasionally called it the handball game.
Okay, yeah.
Doogie Freeman calls it the Doogie Freeman game. It's probably the phrase. Yeah, he and I have a strange and slightly tortured relationship, basically. But it kept us. Not only did it keep us in the second tier, arguably kept us in existence. I mean, I think had we been relegated that day, I think that would have been. I don't think how we could have come back from that financially, to be honest. The way we were at the time, things looked more parlous even in 2020. But at the time, I think that would have done for us. So it was an incredibly important game. Unfortunately, I was in Pompeii. At that time, I was still going to every home game, as I do now. But at that time, I was still going to most away games. But around just after Christmas, we're both freelance, so we're not always earning money at the same time. See what I mean? But just after Christmas, I'd come out of a really good job. She'd come out of a really good job and was going into a really good job. And she said, "Look, you've got a birthday coming up. You've always wanted to go to Pompeii. So for the weekend of your birthday, my birthday is 2 days before that game. She said, why don't we go to Pompeii?" And I went, "Well, I'd love to, darling. Of course, it's always been an ambition to go to Pompeii. I love history and archaeology, but it's the weekend of the last game of the season on the Sunday." And she said, "I'm ahead of you. I've looked at the league table, and you're currently 9th. So there's no way you're going to get relegated." And I said, "Well, I'm ahead of you. We could be in the playoffs." So, but she persuaded me that that last game of the season would be a pointless waste of time, and wouldn't it be a shame to miss? Because she was going off to work afterwards as well. She said, "Wouldn't it be a shame to miss the chance to go to Pompeii for a few days?" So cool that, and I blamed her for it. Because we didn't win another game after our form. We just went into freefall, total and utter freefall. So Alan Smith, who was our manager, our lovely playboy manager, Alan Smith, he disappeared. Steve Gember came in, who was a Palace legend, managed to get a couple of points. We got a win at Portsmouth, and then I can't remember else, but we just managed to cling on by our fingernails. And we knew that beating you would keep us, unless it was a really bizarre set of circumstances, we knew that a win against you would be enough.
Yeah.
But I spent the whole day, the place I wanted to visit all my life, I went, and Ali had organised individual tours, but this was the early days of mobile phones. I couldn't get a signal for love nor money. And the woman who's tour guiding us says, "You won't be able to get a signal here. We're right on the edge of the curve." And I was going, "I must be able to get a signal somewhere." So I was climbing up 2,000-year-old columns with Roman gods on them, trying to get us nothing, just couldn't get, literally. Well, and all these people from all around the world wondering who this idiot was, who was ignoring, so the guide saying, "Well, not many people get to see this, but this is a fresco." And I go, yeah, fine, please, what about your phone? And no, so you get back to the station, and you go straight into a tunnel. And it's like, so you're in this tunnel between Pompeii and Naples for about half an hour. So it's 6:10 at this stage, and I'm just frantic. And it's literally, and this is a true story, as we came out of the tunnel, about 15 seconds later, we came out of the tunnel into daylight. I heard from the front of the train this yell of this, literally, "Fuck, get the fuck." And I thought I'd better investigate this, because part of you thinks, and I walked to the front of the train. There's a bloke running back to me with a Palace shirt on, and he just went, "I thought I'd seen you on the train." He said, we stayed up. So,
wow.
But that's all he'd got. He'd had enough signal for his mate to say we stayed up. So it was 10 o'clock that night before I found out the circumstances and saw the scenes of joy. So, and to this, because my wife occasionally says, "Should we go back to Pompeii?" I said, "I'm not going back to Pompeii again ever in my life, because you never know what could happen between now and the end of the season." So, the place I'd wanted to visit since I was 5 is now it's I just associated with the. I've never been more frustrated. I was just so frustrated trying to find out, and then of course you think, well, I'm not getting any messages because we must have gone down. It's as simple as that. That's why, because you think there must be some signal somewhere, but we've obviously been relegated. So I was just in a state of despair. And then you'd go, no, hang on, there's just really is no signal. And then this complete stranger, and I still didn't find out why he was in the palace at Pompeii or what the circumstances were. But so he and I had a little hug and some tears. But then we had to get back in a hotel before there's any decent work. So, because again, we're having a special weekend away, and I'm spending the last night of it in the hotel where we're supposed to be going out for a meal. I'm hanging out the window talking to mates and trying to find highlight videos on my phone in the deep south of Italy. So, but yeah, so it's one of those games that every club, you've got special games. It's one of those games that live long in the memories. It's like beating Brighton in the semi-final of the playoffs at their place after a nil. It's like we've all got those games, but Stockport is high on the list for Palace fans of games with most important. Like most Palace fans, in the same way that in Henry V he talks about soldiers, medieval soldiers, when they hear the word Agincourt, standing on tiptoe and the light of battle coming into their eyes. You say Stockport to a Palace fan of a certain age, and he knows what you mean. He stands up straighter. He knows what you mean. So it should have been disallowed. It was a clear handball from Hopkin, I mean, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, and I've seen the highlights a million times, but I've reminded myself of them today. And there was a couple of nervy moments for you as well, where there was nearly an own goal. Kikuchi was nearly played in by Tommy Black as well.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you then. So in hindsight, obviously you lived through the Pompeii thing. I didn't know about that, so this is a question off the cuff. And then you've seen the highlights. Which would you have preferred, actually, to be in the ground now, thinking about it, or trying to get a signal in Pompeii?
Being in the ground. You can go Pompeii. Pompeii will be there. Pompeii's never going to move.
Well, you say that.
Well, yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, I can go back to Pompeii, but it's still a source of. There's nothing more smug than the Palace fan who's been in an away game you haven't been. Basically, I mean, it's like. All I can say, it's like the away end at Anfield must have been much bigger than I thought, because the amount of Palace fans who claim to have been there for the 9-0, and I know for a fact they weren't there for the 9-0, but no, I'd much rather have been there. I'd have been a nervous wreck. But it's the same with the Sheffield Wednesday game when we stayed up in 2020, when again you could argue that would have put us out of business when we went up to Sheffield Wednesday, and you end up with some unlikely heroes in a team that wasn't very good, but you end up with some unlikely heroes out of it that you'll love forever. Yeah, like Sean Derry, for example. Yeah, because you sometimes, like I say, it's the adversity you remember more than the decent sides. But no, the fact that I missed that Stockport game is a source of great, because I just know what it would have been like on the train. It just would have been the most amazing journey on the train home. It's like it would have been. Yeah. It would have been fantastic. So no, I really regret not being at that game.
Fair dues. Okay, last few bits then. Players that played for both. It's a bigger list than I thought it'd be, actually, and this is probably not a full list. I won't ask you to name them unless you want to have a go.
No,
some of the older ones.
Right back at the start of this conversation, I told you how little research I do for the price of football. I've kept that up. But you mentioned one of them. Chef Kikuchi was one of them, wasn't he?
He was. Yeah, he was. Yeah. He came over, I can't remember where, from overseas anyway, into England, played for us first, and I think he did a bit of a tour where he ended up playing for you.
Yeah, he was terrible.
You see, he was great for us, but this is going to be a running theme probably. There's going to be a reason why, we're lower league. It's great for us when we play. Your higher league is probably terrible for you. We've actually got a player on loan now called Teo Adaramola.
Adaramola, good player.
He's pretty decent for us.
Yeah, it's a strange one. One of the things that Steve Parish has always argued for is the return of reserve team football in the Premier League. And I understand what he's saying, because he just says it's very, very difficult to get youngsters proper first team. So if we still had a reserve team system, they would be playing every week against Premier League players, essentially. Whereas now we send these players out on loan. They're all good potential players. And I kind of get the argument. It teaches them to be strong, and it teaches them to take a tackle, but it doesn't necessarily make them better players. And also, I'm not entirely sure what lower league teams get out of our academy products. We don't tend to produce big, tough, hard-running individual players. We tend to produce a lot of wingers, but they're not always big. Centre backs and wingers we're good on, but it's impossible for the youngsters to get first team experience without sending them off to Stockport or Swindon or Exeter, the way we tend to do.
Yeah, I mean, my own personal opinion on that is that I think it depends on the player and the fit of the club. Certainly, in our case, we've got a championship grade training facility, and we're a very technical team because that's how we want to play, and we've got our own ambitions. It would probably be a good match there. Whereas I wouldn't send him off to Barrow, because it's probably going to be played on a sandy pitch and that kind of thing.
Well, Mark Bright, nobody's quite knows what Mark Bright's job is, apart from being Steve Parish's best mate, sitting next to him at Palace games. But his job, technically, he's the loan organizer. So he is looking for clubs that will suit the style of football that our youngsters play. Because, as you say, it's pointless sending them to a team that play long ball, really physical football, because they're not going to learn anything from that experience. I find it really frustrating when we bring. It's embarrassing. We play Chelsea on Saturday, and we can't play Trevor Chalobah. It's because he's from Chelsea. It just embarrasses me that we take players on loan that then can't play against big clubs. Yeah, I always think I just think, come on, lads, our academy has got to be better than that. A club our size shouldn't be relying on loan players.
Yeah. Do you ever get the old you're a feeder club for Chelsea kind of thing?
Historically we've had a lot of links with Chelsea. Historically, old Palace players went to Orient. That was the way. This is the way their career. But things like Conor Gallagher, when Conor Gallagher came on loan, we loved him when he was at Palace on loan from Chelsea. But he made it quite clear from the start that he didn't want to stay at Palace. That he was a Chelsea fan. He's a Chelsea kid. Even though he got into the England squad because he was playing for us, and we would love him to stay, we knew that he would go back to Chelsea. So there is that. Every now and again, you get that stark reminder of your place in the food chain, if you like, when you've got a player who's starting every game for you, but then can't start again the team they're on loan from.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay. So who else is on that list then?
Well, Clint Hill is our assistant manager.
It's Clint. That Sheffield Wednesday game I talked about, when basically Damien Delaney tells a story about Clint Hill, because Clint famously, all the Palace players were back in the dressing room celebrating, going mad. And somebody went, "Where's Clint?" And someone said, "Oh, he got surrounded by Wednesday fans that are all having a go at attacking him." And Paul Hart, our manager, went, "Shouldn't we go?" And they went, "Nah, he'll be fine." And he was apparently turned up 5 minutes later, a little bit dishevelled, but with having fought his way back. Clint Hill was he was never the best player in the world, but he's a Palace legend, because he was part of that team that every now and again, every club has a team, a selection of players. Like our 1990 FA Cup semi-final to FA Cup final team, and then finished third in the first division. 7 of them were local, and they weren't a good football team. We weren't brilliant to watch, but if there's ever going to be a statue at Selhurst Park, it needs to be of Steve Coppell. But they would walk through fire for Palace. And that Clint Hill team were the same. And every now and again, they're the players you really, really respond to. They're the players that you go, "How have you done that?" And they're the players who really, really stuck their chest out and dug in and threw punches when necessary. And you just think you've done that for us. And you'll never forget them for doing that.
Yeah. Well, that's it. And we've got him in our dressing room now. That's what you just said there makes me, that's brilliant. Matt Jansen. He's at our place.
Do you know what I feel? What's his role at your place?
Oh, I should know it, shouldn't I? I think he might be performance, perhaps. Performance. We talk about all these departments. We've got all those now. So yeah, I think he's in performance, that kind of area.
He was. It's a bit like Johnny Williams, who's arguably the best player we nearly had. Johnny Williams. He was fantastic. Came for our academy. Just couldn't. Connor Wickham the same. Just couldn't buy a break. Couldn't go 2 games without injury. Matt Jansen is one of the best strikers we've seen at Sellers Park. He was fantastic, off the scale. Then had a car crash and just never happened for him. He was a superb player. I mean, there wasn't tuppence of him. He was really lightweight, but he was the most instinctive finisher I think I've seen at Palace for a long time. He was a very similar player to Doogie Freeman in a way. But and of course, I should explain how all Palace fans have a strange relationship with Doogie Freeman now, because he was our manager, but he resigned on the morning of a game against Millwall to manage Bolton, and referred to Bolton as a bigger. He said Bolton were a bigger club with better fans. So it's still taken him a while to work his way back into our affection following that behaviour. But Matt Jansen was a similar player to Doogie Freeman, same sort of build, and by all accounts, a really nice lad as well. So,
yeah, no, he's doing well, and I think he's been with us for a while now. But yeah. I'll rattle through the others. Dean Henderson was on loan at County back in National League North.
Crikey, how long was he? He was okay.
Yeah. I'm going to say 2016, I think.
He was. I think after Will Hughes, he's probably our player of the season so far.
Yeah.
He's having a magnificent season, Henderson.
Yeah, I've been watching him with interest as a former County player. So and he's getting in the England squad at the moment, isn't he, as well? So
I would. Of course, I would say this. I think he's better than Pickford.
It's probably for another podcast, but
you're quite right.
I tend to agree with you on that one.
You're right. It's another podcast, and I realise I've got to go to the theatre this evening. He said,
"Yeah, there's only really 3 more. I'll rattle through them. Andy Priest, I think he's a bit of a legend at your place, is he? Or
I wouldn't go so far as to say he's a legend, but he was, he was a good player.
Yeah, Eddie McGoldrick had 2 games on loan at County.
Well, now you're talking legend, mainly for the moustache. Yeah. Eddie's up there with, because he was just after that 1990 team, but he was. Again, he's one, as my mum used to say, one of those players would have to walk around in the shower to get wet. But he was he was a real throwback as well. He's just like, it's just a proper. We've always loved wingers at Palace. Palace it's always been, for as long as I can remember. It's like Don Rogers was my first idol. Then we had Peter Taylor, Vince Hilaire. We've always liked Wilf, of course, Yannick Bolasie. But Eddie McGoldrick was one of those. We've always liked somebody who just. Alan Irvin's another, just hugs the touchline, but they're such a rare breed these days because they're asked to do so much work, in the rest of the game that they really enjoy. Elise was a bit of a throwback, but again, Elise would come off the wing at every opportunity. I like a winger who stays there, doesn't get involved, just wait and get some crosses in. So who's the other one then?
So last one, Glenn Murray. I mean, Glenn Murray was on loan at our place. We don't really like him because he came back and used to score past us all the time. But I guess he played for you and notched a few times in the Prem, I think, didn't he?
Well, he's a strange one because we got him from Brighton. And one of the first goals he scored against us was we were the first team to beat them in their new place. And there was a brilliant YouTube thing that went viral when he scores. You can hear this Brighton fan going, "For fuck's sake, Murray," which then for 2 years became the favourite. We sold about 1,000 5-year plan T-shirts with "For fuck's sake, Murray" written on the front. He was a magnificent player for us. The only thing with Glenn Murray, again, Damien Delaney, who had a really good turn of phrase, once said to me, for some people, the glass is half full. For some people, the glass is half empty. For Glenn Murray, the glass is smashed and heading towards his face. He is the gloomiest bloke you'll ever meet in your life. But he's doing well as a pundit. But they would have, when we were getting out of the Championship and in the early days of the Premier League, when it's him and Zaha and Bolasie and Murray, proper old school wing play with him. What a header of the ball he was. He was fantastic, Murray. But I guess I'm really pleased he's turned into a good pundit. That's good.
Yeah, no, he has. He's doing really well as a pundit. As much as I don't really like him that much, but there you go. There you go. Right, brilliant. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me on this special opposition preview podcast for Crystal Palace.
It's my pleasure. Sorry for banging on so much. I do like the sound of my own voice.
No, it's the pleasure's been all mine. It absolutely has. This is going to go out onto YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of our podcast players, all the usual platforms.
Nice one.
And if you have liked this, please do like and review and subscribe and all those good things that I tend to forget to say at the end of these podcasts. That's why I'm saying it now. So thank you very much, and hope you've enjoyed the podcast. Cheers. Thank you.
I hope you all have a happy and safe journey to Selhurst Park as well, and enjoy the day up to a certain extent, obviously.
Up to the 3 p.m. threshold.
Yeah, up to that bit, yeah. I don't mind. You can have a good first half. That'll be fine. Up to about 3:50, shall we say? Let's.
Fair dues. All right. Cheers, Kevin. Speak soon.
No worries. All the best, mate.
Cheers. Bye. And that's a wrap for this episode of the Scarf Bagara War. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. Remember, you can catch us every week on your favourite podcast platform, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts. And a huge thank you to all of our Patreon members. Your contributions help keep the show running to bring the content you love. If you'd like to support the podcast and get access to exclusive special guest episodes, ad-free podcasts, and a monthly giveaway, head over to patreon.com/the Scarf Bagara War. And don't forget to follow us on social media for updates, behind the scenes content, and more. You can find us on X, Facebook, and Instagram, all at County Podcast. Lastly, if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a review and share it with your fellow County fans. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more listeners. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Scarf Bagara War. Come on, County!